Hi, everybody. A guy with a scarf just back from Amsterdam. And this time I won't bore you with what I saw at IBC in Amsterdam, blah, blah, blah. But I'll spend the time with my good friend, Paolo Pescatore. Ciao, Paolo.
Ciao bello, come andiamo?
So,
Stai
yeah,
bene?
he speaks, he
Rispondo.
speaks good Italian. He speaks good Italian. Sto bene,
It's
grazie.
not what you said to me on the show floor. I think you were taking the mickey out of me.
Basically, I'm an Italian that pretends to be a citizen of the world, and Paolo is a citizen of the world that sometimes tries to be Italian. Even if, I mean, the name and the surname are absolutely Italian, he speaks very
Alla
well.
grande, ottimo. I couldn't have said it better myself.
So we are extremely complementary in many ways. So I thought instead of doing a boring, the highlights of the IBC alone or writing a long article, I thought, let's see what Paolo has seen, because we just met like 2-3 times, but we spent time doing different things. So I'm sure we have two different stories of the show. And first and foremost, I know Paolo is an analyst with access to really the big decision maker in our industry and also in big tech. I'm sure from the beginning of the year, he has a view of the vibe. I don't want to go in detail, but what was the vibe in the different events arriving at IBC then?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Carlo. It's always a pleasure, and obviously, I value your opinion. Sometimes we don't always agree, and I think that's the beauty. In terms of we're very, very strong, opinionated individuals, and as I said on our previous chat, I make no secret of the fact that. I take pride in the fact that I do go to numerous events, starting from CES, and obviously, we've now just come back from IBC, and the shows obviously are catering for different markets and segments. And for me, I make no secret that CES is the kind of the default show for me. It's the one that really sets the tone for the year ahead and beyond in terms of where the overall vision of content, connectivity, and connected devices are going. So there's no shortage of news. There's the weird, the wonderful, wacky stuff, some of which don't obviously make it onto to the shelves into the point of sale at retail. MWC is another big show. That was obviously, a core show for me, given my roots coming from the connectivity world, and everybody, in every industry, adjacent industries and verticals, plow into Barcelona for MWC because they all wanted to know, what's the role of connectivity, where we're going with connectivity, and how do we reach new audiences. These, irrespective of which vertical or business you come from. So I think, those are perhaps the top two from what I could see. GITEX, which I'll be going to next month, is another huge show. It's actually the biggest show in attendance in the world for consumer electronics, and that's becoming extremely relevant as well. And then you then get some of these other shows like NAB and IBC that seem to be retrenching somewhat, but still remain hugely relevant networking shows because it's a great marketplace for people to meet. So I think in a nutshell, that's what I would say, in the context of some of those shows and where I see the value of them.
And trying to be a bit factual, comparing NAB and IBC, we saw quite a downturn in terms of attendance from NAB. And IBC was, I think, 2,000 less than last year. And again, these are all absolute/relative number, because we know that if there are 2,000 exhibitors, maybe in average there are, I don't know, 610,000 people that are core because they are exhibitors, right? So it's not that there are 4,000 people that you can sell to when you go there, right? But still, so the decrease from last year was less significant, right?
Yeah, just to add to that as well, there's obviously an element of numbers and attendance, and a lot of people pay a lot of attention on those numbers as well, and how much of that are the actual people manning the stands, and then of course the students that come along during the shows as well. And I think, as well as the actual numbers declining year on year, I think also the number of exhibitors fell this year compared to last year, which I think gives you a real sense of that of the industry and of the challenges that everyone faces. And I think, one of the things that's quite striking to me when you're walking around, there were companies that clearly decided not to exhibit
Yeah.
at IBC. There were no notable companies that we both know in common that decided to scale back their own stands for obvious reasons. But then on a positive note, there are also some companies that we had the pleasure of meeting who decided to exhibit for the first time, such as Tiled Media. So I think, I guess it depends what part of the value chain you're operating in. And then, but again, there are challenges for companies who are spending, some are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds, euros, dollars for space and catering and Wi-Fi, people to man the stands, because obviously there's the travel cost as well. If they're investing huge sums, they want to have a return on investment, Carlo. And if the numbers are declining or the quality of people aren't turning up that they anticipated, that's worrying. And that's something that really needs to be addressed for everybody concerned.
I have to say, my experience this year, and again, this is super personal. So, as you know, I've been 35 years in a company. Now it's 2 years I go to IBC as a sole entrepreneur, whatever, creator, blah, blah, blah. And maybe
consultant, analyst, advisor.
Yeah, exactly.
I did the CSI Awards, and there was one individual. I had to read his title out, and I hosted the evening, and one of the judges, and I think his title had analyst, advisor, consultant, vlogger, blogger. There's too many titles.
I simplify Mega with a scarf, so it's completely off topic.
Perfect. Nailed it in one.
So I had the impression that maybe there was less chaos, positive chaos even, so less, but a bit more reality. So it was more
realism.
At least for me.
Realism.
So there was realism, but also the discussion were real. We were not everybody was trying that everything is amazing, they have the best product and everything is great and we have solved. There was more realism, which normally it's reassuring. To me, it's reassuring because I don't like bullshit, to be honest. So, and the discussion I had were all meaningful. And I think there is also, it's also clarity on my side now. I either work, I am an observer, but I work with people if they are decent enough to pay me. Otherwise, I don't, which is at some point something you have to learn. I never had to collect the money. I was a giver, not a taker. So this is very personal. But in general, I spend time in all five, a bit of all one, Future Tech Stage. I've done only one conference. I missed one or two that I wanted to watch. So I don't have like the perfect picture. I'm not sure which is the new amazing product, but for sure, I still see that the big booths, the big stands are less and less, or they seem more connected to the old world than to the new world. Case in point, AWS has possibly the biggest presence in all five.
Yeah.
And Microsoft is a bit in the Future Tech stage. I haven't seen Google, but I may be wrong. So big tech is also using AWS. Seems the one that is really doing a lot with this kind of sector. So, but I don't know if you have specific. And I spend my time working with my client Clink. We did Retention Zone Live the night before, which was a good event with speakers that were extremely on point, focused on monetization, subscription, and retention. And then I worked with Dolby OptiView. I met another maybe 8 companies trying to see if we can work together. So for me, in that sense, it was simple, positive, real. I avoided the chit chat because I'm professionally social. I'm not too social. So I did drinks and parties, but simple.
Everyone wants to spend time with you. There's so many observations I could make. And to add to that, look, I walk thousands of steps every day to get a sense of all of the halls. I think in some of the halls that you mentioned, I did noticeably see the volume of traffic being a lot lower compared to the other halls. And the halls that very much consisted of companies, around the cameras. There was lots of innovation around the camera. live production and content creation. And that clearly is where the value resides. It's all about still the unique storytelling, and those areas I saw them continuously flooded with people. And to your point with AWS, I think AWS always stands out as one of the busiest stands because of the fact they've been able to kind of expand their suite of capabilities more around the whole of the live production, the need for cloud and virtualized IP workflows. And I think for that particular reason, they do stand out, and they do attract a huge presence of people wanting to know how they do. You know, the number of demos that they have is extremely impressive. The amount of partners they bring to the table is equally as impressive. And, you know, they seem to be a go-to company now for absolutely everyone. You know, there's a couple of the comments that you made earlier around the realism. I got that sense as well. I think last year there was a lot of dressing up. Whereas I think this year it was mixed in my conversations. There were some still trying to pretend, saying, yeah, things are all good. You know, we've had really good conversations. We're really happy, which was the same old story. But, you know, it's highly unlikely that the deals will get done. And for many of them, it's about trying to save face. But equally, there were some that were being very extremely open and honest and saying, you know, look, you know, we've had some really, really good meetings, and you know, we're hopeful that things will happen and move in the right direction. I think there's one challenge though, going back to one of my earlier comments around attendance and numbers. Most of the people I spoke to said the meetings they had were scheduled meetings. Very, very few people are now walking up to stands wanting to know about a particular company or what they're doing. It just feels like we've got to a point that you know, it's plateaued. You know, even perhaps last year or the year before, everyone kind of knows each other, and so if you need something, you know who to go to. And so I think, you know, there now needs to be a shifting gear to kind of accelerate that beyond that element. You know, there wasn't anything that really stood out in terms of, you know, significant announcements or within the conference sessions where you think, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So I think there's some of those areas still probably perhaps need to be addressed.
See, I agree. One thing that I just noticed I just realized as you were saying it, possibly, I don't want to say 100%, but maybe it is 100% of the people I talked to, they were talking to me about live sport. You know, maybe you can help us tell our story in live sport. So the focus was live sport. Maybe because they're starting to understand, and I'm not sure that's 100% correct, that there is a bigger market in sport than what we traditionally know, because the players are now, and to be honest, I'm back from Amsterdam and I started 3 articles, and there is another news for which I shift article because it becomes more, I don't know what to cover. So there are so many things I want to talk about. But after, so not connected to the IBC, deals that happen, numbers, the streaming analytics is becoming a Netflix series because everybody gives a different number. So I don't know, there's so much. So I have a sense that in say in streaming, there is a lot of vivacità in Italiano.
Dynamic,
Positive,
yeah,
dynamic, absolutely dynamic.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
a lot of things are happening.
You're spot on, and I think it's very, very clear. You know, particularly when you break it down, and there's so many different facets to it. To my earlier comment around content, the cameras, etc., etc. One of the few genres that still drives significant value, and you hit the nail on the head, is live sport. And so that's where you see a lot of the innovation coming, you know, where it's kind of, you know, a multi-view environment, more personalized, whether you introduce subscription, advertising, and that's kind of, we've seen a huge shift in the last year, as you well know, you know, in the streamers' interest to move more into live sport. And it's no coincidence. It's one of the few areas where people are still willing to pay, you know, to watch live sport like that. So, you know, and that's always going to be the case, and that will always remain the test bed for innovation throughout the entire value chain. And that won't change, whether it's the cameras, whether it's robotics, whether it's remote production, or we get to the point where there's going to be no cables in the connected stadium or entertainment. And then, of course, you know, we know, you know, it's it's all about the streamers, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Disney. And most of these companies have invested heavily already in their own architecture, and they continue to invest more to ensure they have the right approach. And let's be honest about it, broadcasters who would have bought from a lot of those companies in the
Yeah.
halls that you mentioned, they have been slow. They've been very late to market, and they're managing huge challenges in their own markets around, cost and revenue, the audiences, the flock. The same challenges remain. And that's why I'm somewhat disappointed when you look at the conference sessions and they're still talking about how the broadcasters have to adapt to YouTube being potentially a prime destination for viewing on TV. All of this we've all known. I don't need to go to another conference session to know the same thing. The challenges are what they are. Let's rip the Band-Aid off completely and face it on head on. And, and to be fair, I think the broadcasters on the whole in Europe in particularly have done a really good job of slowly pivoting towards this cloud IP driven world. Of course, there's some challenges they still need to face, but they do what they do best. And it's all about content.
Mm-hmm. And one thing, sorry, that you mentioned the conference, I have a sense that maybe apart from the content in general of any conference in our sector, but the fact that it's so detached. There is a conference and there is the IBC. I understand there are economics, so they want to.
What do you mean? What could you possibly mean? Economics.
No, that you have to pay to go to the conference.
Show me the money. Show me the money.
No, but still, the fact that if they were more maybe joint in some way or more merged, you could create a bit more value. But I don't have an answer.
Well, to be honest with you, Paolo, I think one thing that IBC on the whole does very, very well when you walk around the show floor, they do have a number of these conference seminars, workshops, and hubs scattered around. So at least they do try, and give you a sense of what the show floor is like, and they get some of the speakers from the exhibitors, etc. I think there's a broader and wider question around the format of the show. Does it still need to happen over a weekend? Some people are complaining around the cost of attending in terms of the hotel, in terms of the hotel fees, the whole tech zone. Look, let's be honest about it. The tech zone, lovely idea. I was really excited to visit, but effectively felt like a rehash of the AI zone that they talked about last year. A lot of the companies still focused on AI powered solutions. So I think there needs to be a broader element around innovation throughout the value chain. So why can't we have some of the camera companies there? I did see there was a company focused on robotics. Why can't we have a bit more diversity that reflects the wider ecosystem rather than specific parts? Is what there are lots of areas. There's lots of areas of improvement across the board. And
let's close on AI. I know you have quite a strong opinion.
I'm surprised it took this long to talk about AI. To be honest with you,
It was not a clickbait approach. So, very quickly, I also did photos of the different stands to see the messages of the companies. Everybody's kind of talking about AI. I didn't spend time on that too much, if not observing. I talked to people that are really using it. So, and successfully or not, because the adoption will be the significance of success. Because if there is no adoption, then we're playing a bit. What's your take on that?
Well, look, I guess, I know that we actually probably haven't done the entire event justice because, it takes place over 4 days. We can't be everywhere every single minute. Hence why I think there's different parts of the event that are extremely significant. What I'd say about AI, it's inevitable in terms of the rollout and the deployment of AI across the value elements of the value chain. Those that get in early can learn very quickly and learn from their mistakes. But the initial adoption and the successful implementation of it has been in time whereas before it would take hundreds of hours of people's time to cipher through metadata, tagging, subtitles, has now been kind of cut through the use of AI. So I think there are some tangible benefits around that. File sharing is another one, because we're still thinking about huge files that need to be kind of shared in a way that you optimize the transfer of those files is usually significant as well. And it opens up, there are tangible revenue opportunities with the introduction of AI in terms of understanding more about the users, their tastes and behaviors. And the company that's excelled in that has been Netflix, and they still remain number one in understanding the attitudes and habits that gives them the confidence to invest heavily in the next biggest blockbuster. I think once you start thinking beyond that, it's a little bit wishy-washy. Do you want to rely on AI on content creation? Well, yeah, hold on, walk before you can run. At IFA, I was invited to the Lenovo event where they had an executive from DreamWorks Animation.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how there's value in AI in creating stories that are for animated theatrical productions and tied into huge workstations that can power because of the amount of compute that's required. So it was no coincidence, and I know I'm pivoting somewhat a little bit here. Just walking around the show floor, there was a strong endorsement and validation for NVIDIA, where a lot of the chips for the processing power are powered by NVIDIA. Now, I'm not too sure if many people saw that, but make no mistake about it, it really is all about the advances that are happening at big tech and connectivity. And again, just to pivot on, because I know we're running out of time, the value of 5G moving forward in the whole area, not only of production and contribution, but also in the consumption of it. And there were some good user cases that I saw in that tech zone around around the use of 5G and conquering the skies, of providing, coverage of specific sporting events. So there are a lot of synergies there that, again, I go back to my preview and what I've said before. It's really disruption that's come about from what's happening in the big tech world, combined with connectivity, that's really, really shaping the potential opportunities that lie ahead for a lot of these companies.
Amen. Basta.